Hi, everybody. My name is Trish McCabe. Thank you for watching. Welcome to Conversations from the School of Hard Knocks. I've taken a bit of a break because unfortunately my sister passed away. My sister Cher McCabe. And I would like to just take a moment to dedicate this podcast series on the topic of poverty to my sister. And this is why I've decided to really focus on this particular topic because it's greatly affected me and my family personally. So, anyways, without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest, Opal. Opal's been
Hi.
here before. Welcome back. And on audio, my guest, Jen. Welcome, Jen.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so I'm just going to explain this to the guests. When you have more than one guest, the meeting gets cut a little bit short. So we may do this in two small segments today. Anyways, the topic today is poverty and basically how it affects people. You guys, before we did this today, I sent a question to you both. What is it about poverty that upsets you the most, concerns you the most? And I talked with Jen before this podcast and told her I would like to start this discussion with your answer, Opal. I think your answer was really powerful. I love Jen's, but I think Jen is going to really appreciate your first concern, the thing that you felt was like really important. Um, anyways, so
The thing that aggravates me the most about poverty is the fact that the idea of poverty is completely jacked up. You have to make more than $33,000 a year to not be on the poverty level. And I don't know of anybody who does make 33,000 a year that's not, killing it or whatever. But most single mothers don't make 33,000 a year. And even if you don't make 33,000 a year, let's say you make 29 or even 30,000, you still make too much for state aid. You still make too much money for help.
okay. And Genevieve, what do you have to say on that? Because she's in a different bracket and is still struggling. So what are your thoughts on that, Genevieve?
I think that there's a lot to be said on that. I think that there's a lot of people, especially today, who make quite a bit more. I'm a registered nurse. I make quite a bit more than what would be the poverty level now. But you can still really struggle financially. And I think people don't realize, student loans or, other things that are required today can really take a lot out of you, and there isn't any help. Sometimes the middle class actually have it a little harder, because if we don't have the money at the end of the month to feed our children, we don't have food stamps or things like that to supplement and make sure that we can do the things that we need to do.
One thing that comes to me immediately is that number doesn't allow for how many children you actually have, right?
Right.
It's like you've got this number, this bar that's not accurate just on that one alone. Because how are you putting that number on the table when when everybody bills, okay, you're talking about bills, but everybody has different amounts of children and each children costs a certain amount. If you get
Some more
logical and
expensive than others.
some more, yeah, you know what I mean? Just the basic cost of caring for a child demands a certain amount. So you add three more children to the equation. And how can that number really reflect everyone? It doesn't. It's a blanket thing that doesn't fit. That's the first thing that I noticed in talking about this. So, anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt, Jen. It just came to me. I'm like, how is that? Because Jen has four children and you have one. And
She makes
That's a really
significantly
important.
more money than I do, but both of us, it
She has
hits,
four
money hits
children.
differently. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Money hits differently.
You have one and she has four. So yeah, she
Exactly.
might make more, but she also has three more children than you do.
She's got more
And
intake. She's got more that she's putting out than she's got that's coming in, especially if she's a single mom. I get it.
bills, yeah, and
Oh yeah.
expenses, all kinds of expenses. Like if you have car trouble, and just that and gas. Let's just not even talk about gas. So the poverty level number, just with gas alone, it just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't a lot. And I think with the whole poverty level, there's not enough inclusion of the cost of living and how it's
Oh, absolutely
continually
not.
going up and the pay rate isn't. So I don't know. It's just these things
No,
came to me.
I agree because when the pay rate goes up, so does the cost of living.
And it doesn't ever get better. So, anyways, but
No.
Jen, is there anything else you wanted to say on that particular?
I find it, I actually don't count myself in under, living in poverty anymore. I've been out of poverty for some years, but the reality, the long lasting effects that poverty has on your life never seems to go away. Like you always struggle with that fear, like, am I going to survive?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a question that a lot of people don't have to ask themselves if they've never experienced poverty.
And when I think of poverty, what I think is when you're living paycheck to paycheck. To me, that's poverty too. When you're constantly having to make ends meet. Maybe you might be in a certain bracket, but that monkey on your back, the wolf
That
always
Robin
being
Paul
at
to
the
pay
door.
Peter. Yeah.
Then there's credit, your credit score, keeping that going, and the unexpected bills that always come. This is just for everyone. It just is just in general. Then you add poverty to what everybody else is going through as a whole. I think um, it's just, how can you not be worried about poverty if you've been really below that number or at that number? How can you not constantly be in fear? Because if you are struggling, and you are, even if you do make good money and you're still living paycheck to paycheck, it's kind of like, it just I think we just need a revamp on what poverty really is. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much more to it, obviously, with us talking about it this way. Of To me, that's how I feel. I feel that poverty is if you're having to, you are working as hard as you can and you don't have any cushion. You're not able to have any kind of cushion in case something happens. You're just literally making ends meet. And I think that that's a lot of people, that aside from poverty. So, and then add
It
poverty
is.
to it as well. That makes
I
sense.
mean, it really is a lot of people because most people are living paycheck to paycheck. They have been for
Yes.
years. Um, there are those people who are lucky enough to be able to put, X amount of money back each month. And that's great. Um, and I was one of those people until my divorce happened. And then my
I,
divorce happened, and then it was like, how did this happen? And I haven't been able to bounce back since.
Yeah, no, I agree. Divorce is definitely one of those death knell things to your to financial stability. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, after you go through something like that, it can take many many years to recover. And you know, I'm grateful at some level that I have experienced poverty in my life, because when I go without some things, I'm like, hey, I've done this before. It's fine. you know, like I
I
don't panic.
completely agree. I completely agree. It's like you're going, okay, I've seen worse. I got this. I'm good. What bill can I stretch just a little bit longer?
And then I think and this just, I mean, I'm just going with the flow here, guys, what comes to my mind, and my spirit of just the purpose of having these conversations, talk about how it affects people, not just the parents, but the children as well. And not having just the demand of being able to provide for them, and the demand of being able to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Calm when stress is on the table, which is just about all the time, and especially where money is concerned. And the sleeplessness, the anxiety, dealing with, issues at work. And if you're struggling at your job and it pays a certain amount, and it's not, and you've got added stress, if you're struggling, if there's internal issues and whatever, you can't quit that job. You have to be able to keep that job because it pays what you need, or it pays the most that you can get for where your area is and what opportunities are available. And I just think that really, for me, and I don't have I'm not a parent, I don't have kids, but I just can't imagine what you guys go through with the stress of having children and having to make ends meet and having that constantly on the table. Sorry, go ahead.
Trish, I think that one of the interesting parts about being a mother, especially a single mother, and knowing that, when something bad happens, nobody's going to come and rescue you. So when, I had children get sick and have to go to the hospital, and, I have to figure out how to work while my kids are in the hospital, so that I can continue to provide for them, because nobody's going to come in and save the day for me. I know that everything rests on my shoulders. And so that means I have to make decisions sometimes that people would say, well, why weren't you there? Why did you leave your child like that? Or whatever the case may be. And thankfully I have teenagers, so I'm not talking about leaving little kids, but it's like, as parents, we constantly have to financially try to make decisions that sometimes people would say is not in their best interest, and is actually serving, money, not your relationship as a parent.
Oh, yes. I love that. Opal, what do you think about that?
I have to agree. I mean, even though, because see where I'm at, I don't make enough money to live on my own. I have to stay with my parents, but even still, it's not my parents' job to take care of me and the kid. I pay my own bills, pay them rent and all that kind of stuff. So when it comes down to her being sick and her being in the hospital, I completely agree with her. It's like one of those, okay, you're at the hospital, you're good. Okay, I'm going to go back to work. I'll see you this evening.
When your mom got ill.
Yeah. I mean, when mom got ill, when Kira gets sick, anything, it's one of those that it's like, you have to make the hard decisions, and not a lot of people understand. I totally understand why some mothers work 2 jobs, and their kids are at home because they can't afford daycare, or they can't afford any kind of childcare. I get it.
And that's not just poor people above that bar. What was it? 33?
Yeah, 33,000 a year. I think that's anybody. I mean, I understand why people have to work 2 jobs. I understand why people,
especially if you own a home and you have homeowners insurance and mortgage and anything that goes wrong with the house at any given time. If you have HOA, I mean, there is just, the list goes on and on. So, I think we need my whole point is we need a revamp on poverty, and because I just think we need to talk about financial struggle as a whole, and it would be all inclusive. because I don't know anyone that isn't struggling financially other than some really wealthy banker friends of mine, you know, which is fine. Look, I'm not talking about and judging people that have money. This is not at all about that. But we do need to really start talking about and getting real with that conversation of the monkeys on your back all the time, like for just about everybody. And then you add kids and poverty level, money, income, and all of that. So, but so yes, I think that's got to be incredibly difficult for y'all to have to. I'm picking up y'all because I like it.
Yeah, that's my fault.
I like it. It's I just can't imagine how difficult it must be to have to decide, make these financial decisions as to spending time with your children and making money and having to sacrifice that precious time you will never get back to work a job. At any rate, at any level that you're at, is just, I think we really need to like make some changes in society and start thinking about like, okay, if we're going to look at what's a commodity, I would think time is your most important, most valuable commodity, because you don't get it back. You can't get a refund. There's no, and especially time with your children and all that. So, but is there anything else you want to add on this particular Opal, since it was your answer that brought this particular to the table?
Honestly, there's a lot of stuff that I could talk about all day long. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time, but I mean, there's the majority of it is the fact that they're trying to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And if you calculate it, $15 an hour is still poverty level.
I consider it an insult. I consider an insult to the very people that have saved the economy in the event of this pandemic and risked their lives doing so. I consider it very devaluing. And a minimum is, the idea of minimum is supposed to be the very least they can pay you, not the actual bar. And so if the company is saying minimum wage, so they're starting from the place of minimizing.
Well, and to me, like if you take a look at what it costs to even rent an apartment in California today,
yes,
like the cost of an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment where I live, you can't get a 2-bedroom apartment under $2,000 a month. Who on God's green earth can pay $2,000 a month making $15 an hour? You just can't do it. You can't. It's impossible.
Even you have a roommate, right, Jen? You have a roommate.
I do. I have a roommate.
So she's actually having to have someone help with the rent, much like you.
And see, the rent is way cheaper in this area compared to what you guys are paying in California, but it's still almost $1,000 a month.
And that being said, $15 federally does not address the truth of statewide economics versus, and not just statewide, but countywide and citywide vary. So that number should be a localized thing. It should be based on your local economy, not federally.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
And see, I sat down one day just for fun and games to sit down and actually calculate how much it would cost for me to be able to afford my own place with the bare minimum. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, internet is a bare minimum because you have schools that are online now. Like my college is online. I'd have to have college. I'd have to have, internet or whatever. And just the bare basics, you'd have to make $25 an hour in this area just to break even.
Yeah. Yes. And it goes back to the cost of living, which is a localized thing. I mean, just like I live in Southern California, I live in the Palm Springs area. I'm about 25 miles west of Palm Springs. And it's so interesting. When I get gas in Palm Springs, it's 30 cents cheaper than in the town that I live in, which actually is a very low economy town. What's up with that? So the wealthy people in Palm Springs pay 30% less. Why? Who's it? How are they coming up with these random numbers? That's very, I want to say it's county. Is it the county commissioner? I mean, I don't know. I'm not well versed on that, but
well, see, here's the interesting thing there. I live, I'm not going to say a city the size of Dallas, but I don't live in a little bitty podunk town either. Our gas here, depending on what part of town you go to, there's about a 30-cent difference.
That's a big difference. You know what I mean? Like, how do they come up with that? I haven't looked into it, but I will.
I know this because the dealership that I used to work at, we actually had a gas tank. And we had to kind of calculate how much it was going to be so that we knew what to price gas at for, any vehicles that we filled up or anything like that. They actually take the amount that they paid for the barrel and they multiply it by, I think, 15 or 20%. Now, mind you, this was 3 years ago, so that they could get revenue back on it. I know.
And that's just that. I mean, but it's a lot when you have to travel to work. It's a big expense. I mean, I drive, half an hour anywhere from, it's about 35 miles away from here, maybe 30 miles, and to and from. So that's 60 miles a day. With gas being what it is, it's just that takes a hit. Your income takes a big hit the more you have to drive. And these are factors that it's just time to have these conversations that we're having and get realistic and start talking about it and wanting to talk with our local city officials, our county city officials, and our state officials about these issues. Because, I mean, we're paying all this money in taxes. I mean, we look at our paychecks and, how many people are in California, working? I mean, that's a lot of money. Where's that money? I'm just saying. So anyways, I don't want to get too off of the topic, but I just think that what you said about the bar is very, very important, and that we need to address it. Our government needs to address this reality, because it really is. I don't know anyone that isn't having this conversation. I don't know anyone that isn't talking about, specifically in California, in particular, the cost of living and the pay rates. And that gap is alarmingly large.
Very, very.
Okay, so there's that. And we can always come back. I want to make this a series so we can come back and if one of you guys come up with something you want to talk about, a point that, or whatever, anything, just please, the more the merrier. Now I asked Jen the same question. What's the thing that bothers her the most about poverty? And Jen, you answered. I'll let you answer. I think you got this, Opal.
For me, having grown up very, very poor, the thing that I can say that has scarred me the most is the shame that comes with poverty. It's going to school. We were too poor for, rain boots when it would rain. And so my dad would tie plastic bags around our tennis shoes so that we didn't get our feet wet when we walked to school. And you were always, I mean, you stick out like a sore thumb when you're really, really poor. And, I mean, that shame actually kind of as an adult turns into a toxic pride of, you know what, like, because you felt so much shame about money your whole life, when people reach out to you to try to help you financially, for a lot of us who grew up really poor, we're like, no, don't offer me money. I can do this by myself. Leave me alone, and
Yes.
that has certainly touched my life since I was a child. And I still struggle with that today.
Yes. Yeah. That feeling of, yeah. I mean, I'm going to be straight out honest. Let's be authentic here. My sister passed away and we had no money. We had no money to bury her. So we had to get her cremated, and the cost of cremation, that's a whole other conversation. We'll have to have it another time. But shoot, this thing is telling me I have to, in 10 minutes, we have 10 minutes, and then we'll take it from there, where we want to move forward. But anyways, I'll make this quick. I just could not believe how expensive it was. And everyone was like, do a GoFundMe. And I was like embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to ask. I don't want to be a beggar. I don't want to go on a public forum and beg for money. But that's where we were. So, behind the clothes.
Beg for money about something as insane as I need money to bury my sister so that she doesn't end up in a pauper's grave. Right. Right. And
what is the pauper's grave? I didn't know about.
The pauper's grave is where they usually mass. They will take people's bodies when they don't have money to pay for it themselves, and they will cremate them all together and throw their ashes out into a community grave.
Oh my gosh.
So that you don't even have the dignity of having your own resting place or having your body be in its own place. You literally get mixed together with lots of other people.
Wow.
I didn't even know that.
Wow. That's wow.
So as I always say, when you're poor, a lot of times you can't even afford to die.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you hear songs and things like that, and the real truth of that, just wow. That's pretty disturbing. I think we need to, it's like, there's something wrong with that. The cremation, what was it, Jen? It was like $3,000 or something initially.
Yes.
Why is it so expensive? Okay, if it's that we need more people to do cremations, well, can we just please do that? So it's not left to like 5 places in the city or whatever, and all that. That's pretty, it's pretty dark, and it's pretty disturbing to me personally.
I don't think anybody should ever have to sit there and wonder, like, how in the heck am I going to get my loved one out of the coroner's office? Right? Like, how do I collect their body? Because realistically, there are so many laws about burial. You can't even if your family owned a little plot of land, you can't take that person and just go bury them yourself. Like, there's all these rules and laws about how it has to be done. So what happens to the people who don't have money? And I think that's what we need to talk about.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But what you said about shame and poverty is huge. I mean, yeah.
So
Yes,
can you
I
guys
identify
give
with
me
that.
an example of when you guys were growing up, something that marked you, that shamed you, that still stays with you today?
Okay.
Honestly, the whole, my mom had to write a check to school for something, and the check bounced, as it normally did. And my librarian came up to me and told me that if we needed to go to the food pantry, they have one every Sunday. And it was kind of one of those moments that, in the back of my brain, I'm going, like you said, that pride, I'm going, I don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
And, and to be honest with you, there were people who needed it that were worse off than we were. So I think that was another reason why, my mom never wanted to do any of those or anything like that. But it was just the fact that I didn't want friends to come over because I didn't want to have to make a concoction just to eat. I wound up going over to other people's houses, and I'm still that way. I still don't like people coming over to my house because I don't want them to judge me based on the food that I have or don't have.
Wow. Yes. Okay. So we're going to take a little break here and come back to, I'm going to answer that question when we come back, Jen, of some experiences that we had when we were little. Okay, guys. So I'm going to end this and then I'm going to send you an invite and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, we're back. Took a quick little break. So the question, well, the thing that you talked about was shame. And you would ask both of us if we'd had experience with the feelings of shame in a scenario that happened that brought shame, that made us feel ashamed. And I actually mentioned this thing with my sister. But as little kids, man, I'm with you, Jen. We were very, very poor. There were 5 of us and we lived in the ghetto. And I mean, there were times when we lived in a 2-bedroom house, 2-bedroom apartment with 5 kids in 1 room and a hot plate. So yes, we grew up in Orange County, which was, wealthy. It's a very wealthy county in Southern California. And we got shamed a lot, and we got shamed a lot. Going to school, not having the proper clothes, we were made fun of a lot. Even teachers sometimes would say mean-spirited comments, and because we looked disheveled, our clothes were, a bit tattered, old, sometimes too big or too small, especially with the shoes and things like that. So, and what that does to your self-esteem and the embarrassment that you feel from your other classmates looking at you, making fun of you. And for me, what I didn't understand is why adults didn't address bullying as particularly when it came to poverty and things that we didn't have control over and weren't our fault. You think that more adults would have stepped in and said, hey, this is unacceptable, you know what I mean? And but yes, we had that quite a bit, man, all the way through into junior high, until I was old enough to get a job and buy things for myself and help my mother out and things like that. So yes, I felt a lot of shame. That's for sure, and it does affect you. I like that. How, Jen, you talked about how it affects you in your adult life. I would like to ask you, Opal, have you experienced the effects of poverty in your adult life, of what you experienced as a child, let alone where you're at now? Like feeling embarrassed that you don't have the money and ashamed and all that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All the time. Whenever there's a birthday in the department that I work, all the girls kind of get together and they go out to eat. And, the last couple of times I've had to sit it out because either I've been sick, the kiddo's been sick, and we had to spend the money that I had budgeted for to go and, at least eat off of the appetizer menu. So I mean, when I have to tell somebody I don't have the money, I kind of feel like in the back of my head, I need to hang my head and go, I don't have the money, and it almost makes it to where you don't want to try to have, some sort of camaraderie or personal relationships with anybody because not everybody understands, dude, I don't have the money.
Yeah. It's interesting how
So
people,
I can talk about that particular thing. I can absolutely like agree with that so much in the way that, you know, I'm in a relationship with someone that has quite a bit more money than me, but I live on the principle of pride, right? Like, so I don't let them pay for me or things like that. And I remember at one point where I didn't feel like our relationship was hugely strong. One of the things that would go through my mind is like, well, if we break up, I'll be devastated, but I won't have to go out to eat so often. So I'll save some money, and that will like it will be better because I don't have to be embarrassed to say I don't have the money, or you know, whatever the case may be. I actually like in some ways almost felt comforted that the relationship might end because then I don't have to pretend, right, that I have money I don't have. Right?
oh boy.
So
Yeah, no, I think that's probably another reason why I don't date right now. One of the many, anyway.
Yeah. Oh, it's really, you know, I went to work yesterday, and as you know, my sister just passed. So it's been very difficult. And I had a really rough day yesterday. And my boss was like, do you want to go home? And I said, to be honest, I can't afford to.
right.
I can't afford to take the time off. And that's not just poor people, it's a lot of people. And it's like one of my biggest reasons for doing this, obviously, because this greatly affected my family. But I just think that if this pandemic hasn't brought quality of life to the table and health and well-being to the table, we spend so much time at jobs. We, you know, I mean, it's great to provide a means to survive, but that shouldn't be the reason why you're doing it, because those hours we work at work, we're never going to get back. And so not only are we not going to get them back, but they're not providing us with our financial needs to where we have to get a second job or whatever we, you know, cut corners, you know, not be able to do things for your children, as I know you guys have to do all the time, make adjustments, which affects your quality of living. And there's just something terribly wrong with that. To me, it doesn't sit well with me. I'm done with it, to be honest. It's like I want a better world. I'm going to say the crazy stuff. I want a better world where people's time are valued equally. The value of a human person's time and energy should be more. And not only is that not happening, but look at what we're talking about here. All this, how this affects us. And it affects us emotionally, mentally. We have sleep issues, all kinds of other health issues because of it. And it's just time to have these conversations.
The movie Time with Justin Timberlake, if anybody listening or anybody in this conversation, if they haven't seen it, I highly recommend it because their currency is time.
Oh.
And you get you work and you get a certain amount of time added to your internal clock. So I highly recommend it. It definitely rings true to what we're talking about.
Think.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jen?
For me, I definitely know that, you know, as I said, I have a job that has taken me out of poverty, but I have to work so hard and so long. And I've worked and I always say it's the great debacle. You know, I've worked in management for many years now, and I'm a salaried employee. And so sometimes, you know, I'm working 17 or 18 hours a day, you know, and I've realized as my children are growing, you know, my oldest is turning 18 in a couple of weeks, and my youngest is going to be 13, that like I'm missing out on time that I could be spending with my children to pay the bills, and when they look back on our life together, are they going to remember mom, or are they going to remember mom always working and never being around, and that kills me.
That was my dad. That was my dad. All my dad
That was
did
my
was
mom.
work. He had 7 children. Well, 8, actually, 8 with my stepsister because he adopted her. And that's all he ever did. That's all he ever did. My dad never had any time for himself ever. He worked 2 jobs till finally he remarried and even then he worked. Even then he was working quite a bit. So and it makes me think of something just real quick here. When I was looking for work, this woman called me back. And I'm gonna say this to y'all out there looking for work. Think about this one. I said she'd liked my resume. She called because she was interested. And I said, well, I have a couple things going on this afternoon. She goes, well, work first. First of all, you don't want to work for somebody that says that and they don't know anything about you. I said, well, they're interviews with other companies. Oh, that work first mentality has to go. It's time for that to go. That's not valuing a person's time. And then the other thing she said, oh, if you come, bring your ID and all that, in case we want to hire you. That's presumptuous. You're assuming that I'll accept the position. Why is it that when we go to look for a job, we're lucky to get a job? Why isn't a symbiotic relationship where you're both meeting each other's needs, not the company's doing you a favor but providing you a job, and just a job, any job? Work first. I don't like that. It doesn't promote vitality. It doesn't promote wellness. And with this pandemic and wellness being so important, why can't we talk about all of the things that help to perpetuate health and well-being? That's something really sticks in my mind. Sorry, I get on my tangent.
No, I was just going to say, I think we need more mental health days where work's concerned. I mean, to be honest with you, because
yes,
I can't tell you how many days I have gotten up going, do I have to? Just because, my anxiety is high, or just because I'm completely exhausted because of the week that I've had.
Jen.
Oh yeah. Oh man. I can definitely say, I had a child get very, very ill twice, and have to be hospitalized twice in almost a 1-month period of time. And the second time that she got sick, I've only been in the current position that I'm in for 7 months. And I thought to myself, my God, what do I say to my company, right? Like, how do I explain that I'm in the hospital with my child again? And, and I think the best advice that I got, because I was so distraught when it all happened, obviously for many, many reasons, but was that this is just a job. They look at you as just an employee. And if you leave tomorrow, you know what, they're going to fill your position and life goes on. And this is just a job. Well, for me, it's not just a job. It's how I provide for my family. It's how I take care of myself and my children and keep a roof over our heads. And, nobody should have to sit in a car in a parking lot by themselves in front of a hospital when their child is sick and cry and think, how do I explain this to my company? How do I say that my child is sick again? It's just not a fair position for people to be put into.
Yes. And on that note, the reason I'm working a physical job, I'll just leave it at that. And normally I wouldn't do it, but I'm working alone, which is kind of good with the pandemic and everything. But the thing that really made me want to work here was when my boss called me because she was interested in my resume and interested in me. I said, I'm in a dilemma. My sister has cancer and I don't know what's happening just yet. I may have to go up north and see her. And she was so just wonderful. And she said, you know what? We're not in a hurry at the moment, so take your time. And when you're able to come in for an interview, just let me know. I was shocked. I mean, she was just so kind. So when I was able to have the interview, I called her. And the first thing she did was ask me how my sister was.
That's awesome. That's
I don't care if you pay less money. That's worth its weight in money as well as your environment. And that's the thing about this whole get a job and you got to get one that pays a certain amount. Then you also have to deal with, the people that you work with and the environment. And
and I think
right. Yeah.
We're raised in a culture that says hard work will bring you freedom, right? That if you work hard, that you'll get freedom. But I always want to remind people when they say things like that over the gates of Auschwitz, a concentration camp, they had the words written, hard work brings freedom, and those people never came out or saw the other side of anything. Hard work is an illusion. I think most of us are working as hard as we can. And many people who make the most money work much less hard than those of us who work incredibly hard, And so I think that whole narrative that if you're poor, it means you're lazy and you're not trying and you're not creative and you're not like, that's a horrible way to look at the world. It's a horrible thing because you know what? You can work really hard at Walmart and dedicate your life to it, and you'll probably always have to have some sort of aid from the state just to survive.
Funny story. My mom actually works there. She made too much money.
That is the part that I was really appreciative of your answer. The bar of 33,000 and the reality, which is your mom, that you don't fit in. So if you make more than that, you're not considered poor. It needs a revamp, obviously. That's why we're talking about this. So I think that's just great that you mentioned Walmart because your mom works there and what a great connection there. But more than anything, and this is where I know I'm going to say the bold things, but symbiotic relationship is where both people come to the table and they meet each other's needs. Why is it when we go to work, we're meeting their needs and we're getting less? So our time is actually worth less than another person. I don't like that model. I don't like that model. It's dehumanizing. And if this pandemic, they're talking about protecting people and honoring and valuing human life, shouldn't we be talking about all the ways in which we can help to facilitate that? Not just in medication, but like, how about prevention? How about treating people well? How about honoring and valuing people's time as much as we're valuing theirs? We're coming to work, we're providing our time, something we're not going to get back, which I mentioned before. Why do when we come to the table, we're not allowed to ask what's in it for us? What's up with that? To me, I'm going to say the bold thing again, it's abuse. I find that highly abusive. I just don't. Why can't you be treated with honor and respect and dignity? And why can't your time be as valuable as anybody else's? It bothers me. I just don't like it. So blah, blah, blah. Anyways.
No, I completely understand and agree.
This woman telling me, work first. No, humanity first. The work first model is broken. I see so many people talking from, my parents worked so hard. Well, so because they did that, wouldn't you want your grandchildren to have something better? Not, well, your grandparents work hard, so you have to too. Why? Why can't we improve so that the future generations, your lineage, have a better life? Call me a weirdo, but I know, Jen, what do you think about that?
You know, Trish, the reality of it is that I think that our, culture has become set in its ways. We're set in the ways of believing that, when I graduated from high school, I moved out when I was 18. And at that time, I split a 3-bedroom townhouse for $900. And so each of us paid $300. My child is turning 18. I have no idea how she is expected to get her own place, live on her own. We don't live in the same world as our grandparents lived in. Like,
Then there's
we
that.
don't.
Yes.
It's a different world, and we can't continue to live with the same ideas because the world has changed. And at some level, we're not taught, people who come from poverty, we're not taught about money because we never had any. Our parents never had any, and we never had any. So we just never knew what to do. And I remember as I was climbing the ladder, I got my education in my adult years. I was 30 years old when I graduated from nursing school. I remember thinking like what I was going to do with my first paycheck, right? Like I was going to be able to provide and do so much more than what I had. Well, I didn't know how to manage money. No one ever taught me. I didn't even have an allowance growing up.
What do you think about that, Opal? What are your thoughts on that?
I had Kira at 18 years old, so I mean, the only time I really got to get out on my own was when I was married, because I had, someone who had almost the exact same type of income as I was bringing in, and we still were barely making ends meet. As far as managing money, my mom actually taught me how to manage money. Even though we were poor, my mom taught me how to cut coupons and find sales. And because she worked at Walmart, she also taught me how to read the labels on what you were actually paying per ounce or whatever to find the best deals.
Great.
So, she did teach me how to manage money, but I do completely agree with Jen. If it was hard for me to get out on my own and I'm still not able to do it, I can't imagine. My daughter, she's going to turn 16 in, less than 2 weeks. And, she's wanting to go to college to do culinary, which is all great. I love it. If that's what she wants to do. But, she thinks that she's going to be able to move out right as she turns 18. And I'm going, in the back of my brain, I'm just going, I don't see that happening, not without a crash and burn, baby. And it's not because I haven't taught her how to manage money or anything like that, but it's because I know that she's not going to make enough money. Not when she first graduates high school. It's not the same.
And this ties in with the key point that I think that affects people that struggle with poverty and they grow up with it is the lack mentality, that you come from a place of lack and there's just not enough. And that affects our behavior. And I think it'd be really great to do the next segment on that. What it not having money and how it emotionally affects you and affects your decision making and limits your thinking. There's so much like if you don't have an education, you can't make enough money, and so many misnomers. I think that would be a great place to start on the next segment of just when you grow up poor, how it affects your decision making and your relationship with money and your belief about money and that kind of thing. Any closing thoughts with you guys? Because it's probably going to give me the 10-minute thing here pretty soon here.
I would have to say that I would recommend everybody to do the best that they can. And one thing that I have learned just from growing up poor and it's still being poor is everything always works out 9 times out of 10 the way it should. You may not have the most money, but at the same time, if you can count on 2 hands the people that love you and the people that you love, that makes you richer than anybody else that I know.
What do you think about that, Jen?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think that, that I have a particular fondness for an understanding of life and death because I've worked in hospice for many, many years. And, I've taken care of people who are dying in mansions, and I've taken care of people in mobile homes who have their roof caved in. And, it's usually, interestingly enough, the people who have less, who are providing better care and have a richer experience of love that they can share with their family. So I don't think that money ultimately is the currency that we should all be seeking. We should be really seeking the relationships that we have.
Yes, I love that. And definitely want to talk more about that. That's wonderful. I've shared this meme on Facebook. You may have seen it, Jen. The learning, once we realize that we don't pay for everything with money, that we pay for it with our time, we realize what actually has value versus what we've been told is valuable. And that's where we need the revamp, because again, we don't get our time back. We don't get a refund. And so we weren't taught that growing up, and especially in the poor neighborhoods, we weren't taught that. So it makes you kind of desperate, and it makes you just not make good decisions. So back to that again, I'll have to think a little deeper on some of this, but so we're going to get ready to close up here. Is there anything else you guys want to close out with? Something that comes to your mind or your heart here? Any message you want to tell people out there about your life experience when it comes to poverty and money and children and the struggles?
I would just say try to have compassion and understanding. And, I know it's so easy to say, like, if people just worked harder, that they would be better off. And the reality of it is we're only able to work with the tools that we're given. And sometimes, the lack of money really affects the ability to move forward and climb out of our culture. And I really do believe that poverty is a culture.
Yes, absolutely. It's a man-made thing. It doesn't have to be this way. We could really create some great changes. I feel very positive about it. It sounds crazy, but I do. But we can't do it until we have these conversations that we're having. Opal, what do you think? What do you want to close out with?
Mine is actually to the people who are going through it right now. Keep your head up.
Yes. And you're not alone.
You're not alone. And from one of my favorite movies, The Crow, it can't rain all the time.
I love that movie. Oh, I just got the goosebumps. Awesome. Yay. Okay. So if you guys would like to come back, I'll have the technical stuff sorted out. Thank you, Jen, by the way, for helping me thank Opal.
Yes,
for your
thank you.
patience. And the next one I would like to just, we'll move forward here. If you guys have any other points you want to bring up too, in the meantime, please, you can send me text message and whatever, but I'll close it out with money can never make a person's value. Your value is not based upon the money you bring in. That's not who you are. Never let anyone make you feel like that. It's not true. Yeah, the most powerful thing we have is to impact another person's life by who we are. Money can't, that's icing on the cake. The cake is who you are as a person. And like you said, Opal, compassion, or maybe it might have been you, compassion and understanding is like the most powerful thing you can give someone,
I agree.
So on that note, thank you, ladies. I appreciate your time so much. And I look forward to the next podcast. It'll be coming up here soon, folks. If you have any questions, anything else you want us to talk about, please feel free to put it in your comments. And thank you all so much for watching. Until next time.